Okay. Hi, welcome to our first LXC in the Wild session where we're wanting to show you real-world use cases of LXC. So we're planning to make this a series. We've got a few already planned, but if you have a real-world use case of LXC that you think would be really interesting to other users of LXC, please contact me. My name is Pat Gahn. My email address is in my title, so just drop me a note. So today we've got Stefan Graber. He's one of the developers here at Ubuntu. He's also one of the LXC maintainers, and he's going to show you how to make it so that when all your apps on your desktop, so you can containerize them. So my first question for Stefan is, why would I want to put my apps in a container?
Right, so there are a few reasons for that. Usually, I've got a bunch of apps I don't particularly trust. That usually includes anything that's pure binary that you just grab off the internet. You may not want that to run directly on your machine and have access to your documents or other tasks that are running there, or be able to do a lot of silly things they could do. That's one of the reasons. The other one is you may want to be running a development release of Ubuntu on your laptop, or be running a release that, even if supported, that's more recent than this release which the software manufacturer supports. In which case, it's pretty convenient just being able to run the application from the software provider directly in an environment which is the exact version of Ubuntu they've been testing with. And
So,
one last reason
okay.
is same thing, but some manufacturers have issues supporting, say, 64-bit properly. So it might be convenient creating a 32-bit container to run their app inside and not have to deal with weird dependencies and other problems that could come along with that.
Now, Stefan, I have a follow-up question on that. So Ubuntu has AppArmor. So my applications should already be kind of, my system
Not
should be
quite.
protected to some extent. Tell me more, tell me more.
It's not, actually. AppArmor can do it, but AppArmor can only do it for applications which come with a profile, and most of them don't.
So
Currently on the
does my
desktop,
web
things like
browser?
a PDF,
Okay, sorry.
web browser do have profiles, but they're not enabled by default in Ubuntu. Currently, as far as I'm aware of, we have a profile for the PDF reader and I think for the instant messaging app, and I think those are the two that are enabled by default. There may be a few more, but if you download a random piece of software off the internet, it's not going to come with a profile. And if it does, obviously, if the piece of software wanted to do something bad on your system, the profile they would give alongside it will just allow it.
Okay. Well, I have more questions on this, but I'm going to wait because I know that when you demonstrate some of this stuff, there's a couple of pauses. So I'm taking some notes because I think there's more to talk about here about AppArmor and then also why containers. But so tell me, like, what are the system requirements for doing this?
Really not much. Technically, you just need a recent version of Ubuntu. So the demo is going to be on Ubuntu 14.04 because it uses unprivileged containers, which are only really supported since 14.04. You could
Okay.
you could get it to work with Ubuntu 12.04 if you use the enablement kernel from the 14.04 release alongside the LXC backport, which we maintain upstream. But it's really, for most people, just easier to get their machine on 14.04 anyway.
Okay, cool. So I think how we're going to plan to do it is we're going to do a short kind of demo, kind of show you what it is, kind of just quick, kind of hopefully suck you in, show it, and then after that we'll then go back and do a more detailed, like, here is all the nitty-gritty detail and how we wanted to make it, how to do this. So Stefan, if you want to take it from here and
Sure.
show us how to containerize our apps, that'd be awesome.
Right. Okay. So just make sure that the laptop screen is focused.
Okay.
There. I'm just going to. So that's my laptop's machine. As you can see, standard Unity, but there are like 3 apps there in the launcher, which are Google Chrome, Steam, and Skype. They look like any regular app, and they work like regular app. I can just launch Chrome like here. But they're actually running inside an LXC container. So I am just basically showing that the web browser works as it's meant to. But you can also easily check that you're actually not running directly on the system by looking at, say, the home directory, where you say it's just Ubuntu with like a minimal home directory, nothing in it. And yeah, because it's a container that doesn't share even the home directory. Now I can confirm that the container is actually running. So we see a container called precise GUI. So that's Ubuntu 12.04, the Ubuntu 12.04 container, which have that's currently running on the system. And I can enter that container and then check the list of tasks, and we see.
And you're just doing this to make us feel comfortable that you truly are running this in a container.
Yes, because otherwise it's sufficiently well integrated that it's not necessarily obvious that you're actually running inside the container.
Right.
So here we see that I entered that container, which is called precise GUI, and we see a bunch of tasks running as the Ubuntu user in there, which are the Chrome web browser tasks.
So do you see any performance impact at all?
Not really. LXC itself is not a virtualization technology. It's a containing technology. So it's really similar to, say, a root. So it's running directly on the same kernel. It doesn't really have any impact to performance whatsoever. In this case, I guess there would be like a minimal impact when going through the network, because that's to jump to your host, which is, in my case, my laptop, and then outside of it. Okay. But it's not going to be noticeable unless you're trying to do things at like 50 gigabit per second or something silly like that.
Yeah, cool.
Which you usually don't.
Yeah. Anyway, Stefan, I believe you that you've got this in a container. So show me more. Sure.
Right. So now I'm going to start something else, which is Steam. All of those apps are actually running from the same container, but it would be trivial to have them run in different containers. The reason why I'm using a single container for that is that it's just easier. Doesn't cause any duplication on my disk. It's just simpler, and there is no good reason for me to actually split those. If I was concerned that one app would steal data from another running the container, then it might make sense to run multiple apps. So here, as you can see, I'm just playing around, looking around Steam. So that's just Steam for Linux installed in that container with a couple of games. Here I'm trying to start City Immersion, simple city simulation game where you can create, simulate transport systems. So that's basically to show that the container has direct access to all of your hardware, including 3D rendering and everything. So it's not like running a game inside a VM, which is terribly slow and not really practical. It's really the same experience as running it directly on hardware. It has direct access to the graphic card, direct access to the sound card, direct access to everything it needs, but not access to anything it doesn't need. Just waiting for the game to load.
Yeah, so because one of the questions I was going to ask you was, so why not KVM? And I feel with this demo you've talked a little bit about that, which is
that's basically why. If you use KVM, it sure is safe, but even Unity itself is barely usable, and Unity is not exactly 3D intensive. So trying to run anything more complex than your window manager in a VM is basically going to use all of your CPU and be horribly slow. Whereas I'm not sure how fluid and everything it is on the Hangout, but here I'm just flying around the city without any lag or any visual problems or anything.
I was hoping you'd have all kinds of, I mean, I don't play any of these games really too much, but I'd hope you would be clear that you were like an advanced user and like you had all kinds of like special armor or something.
Yeah, and I just started the standard city simulation. Besides, I don't have much time to play games. I've got a lot of work and boring stuff to do. I basically use Steam only to test LXC and GUI apps within LXC. So yeah, there again, I'm just going to confirm that Steam is actually running inside the container, and we see it's running there using 20% of the CPU, running happily as the Ubuntu user. So going inside the Steam directory itself, so I can just show that all of the Steam data is stored directly in the container. If you destroy the container, everything goes away. You could set it up so that the data is actually stored outside of it and it's shared with the container, but in this case, I didn't really see the point. Obviously, that means a massively big container. That container is like 20 gigs or something because of the Steam games that are pretty heavy. And then doing the same thing with Skype. So just started Skype, it connects just as you would. Video with Skype works perfectly well as well. LXC just does pass-through for the webcam. And there again, we see that Skype is happily burning through my CPU. So you can see that the quick actions in the launcher menu also work properly. So here I just right-clicked and selected settings for Steam, and it just opened as it would for a standard desktop application. Same thing with the incognito mode in Chrome.
So what is the feature in LXC that enables you to do this?
So all of that is mostly thanks to user namespaces. It was perfectly possible to do that with an older version of LXC, say what we had in 12.04, except that the container itself would have had to be started as root, and then you would have had to do SSH and stuff like that inside the container, which might have been somehow safe, but you wouldn't have had the same kind of guarantee that you do with user namespaces in 14.04.
Right, because you've introduced root there.
Myself, nothing is running privileged.
Right.
So Eventar, I do, and we'll see it later when I show how to set that stuff up. Eventar, I do stuff with sudo and get installed and all that stuff. If it feels like you're root, but you're not. Everything is just running as yourself. So in that regard, it's much, much safer than what we had in 12.04. And also means that any regular user on Ubuntu can basically just do it without having to ask for the system administrator or anything. You need the system administrator to grant you a set of UID, GIDs, and given number of network interfaces you can use. But once that's set up, and that can be set up system-wide for users, say in a corporate deployment or something, then you can just start creating containers and use those as you wish without having to ask anyone.
Okay. Well, now, Stefan, you've convinced me that I want it. So now can you show me how?
Yeah. So first, I just wanted to show one last thing, which is just,
oh, yeah, please.
Starting big picture mode from Steam just as well. So that's the TV mode of Steam that also just works. So like all of the tasks were closed, which means the container itself gets shut down. Then you just right-click, select something you want to do, and it starts the container again, starts the app, and you barely see any delay. That's actually one thing that's worth mentioning. Every time I was clicking on the first app, say Chrome or Steam or something, the container was actually off. And when you click on it, the container starts up, gets an IP, waits for network and everything to be set up, and then start the app. And you probably didn't notice even any delay because that takes like a second and a half, and you won't even notice compared to what you're used to with regular apps.
Okay, now I'm really on board. And I'm serious. You know I'm obsessed with this, so I'm excited.
Right. So setting things up. So as you can see, I just reset my session very quickly. So I no longer have an app launcher. The container is gone, and I'm just going to reset up the box from scratch using instructions that you can find on my website. I've got a blog post on how to set up user namespaces, and I've got a blog post on how to set up GUI applications in containers. And what I'm going to show now is pretty much a merge of the two, where I just do the bits needed from both to get Chrome, Steam, and Skype
And
all
these
working.
and these blog posts were part of your 10-part series on LXC
Yeah.
1.0, correct?
Right.
And
Yes.
your website, your blog is what's the
www.testigreber.org.
Okay.
Which we might see just shortly there.
Yeah, show us. Yes.
So yeah, that's it. That's the front page of the blog. You can access the series of blog posts here on LXC 1.0, and you see that was a few posts. First starting with how to create your first container, then some other advanced usage and unprivileged containers, and one of the last 9 out of 10 was GUI in containers.
Very cool.
Right, so the first thing that's needed is to actually do one action as root, which is to add a new quota for my user. So if we see here, I edited the file, which is etc LXC, LXC-usernet. And that file contains the username, the type of network interfaces, and the bridge they can be added to, and the number of devices. Typically, the number of devices means the number of containers total you'll be able to create, well, to run at one given time. The bridge itself is LXC BR0 that comes by default when you install LXC on Ubuntu, so there's not much to do there, and your username is your username. Currently, we only support VETH devices, so the second column basically always going to be VETH.
Do you guys have plans for others?
Possibly. I think we're currently looking into supporting the, I think it will still be VETH, but some kind of variant of VETH for Open vSwitch.
Or I should let you, you're continuing, let me...
Right. So the other thing you need to do, and that's now as a regular user, is just create a file called in your home directory that's in .config LXC. The file is called default.conf, and that's the basic LXC configuration which all new container will take. For system-wide privileged containers, nothing is needed because we can ship with those settings by default in the distro, as they are common to every single Ubuntu system. That's not the case for unprivileged containers because the actual range of UID and GIDs, which are allocated to your user, will vary depending on when your user was created. So you need to create that file in your home directory, which then includes the system-wide settings and add the maps for the user on top of that. So that's the ID map. So that's an ID map for, that means UID map which match, just there, right. Okay, so that's a UID map, meaning that UID 0 to 65,536 within the container are mapped to UID 100,000 to 165,536 on the host. So it's basically just a mapping table that needs to be set up. My user itself has access to those 65,536 UIDs. That's done automatically when a user gets created. So you just need to tell LXC which ranges are to be used by the container. Then just save the file, and that's pretty much all the configuration that's needed. So we see over there the file I just wrote matches the values present in etc sub-UID and etc sub-GID, which are the two files that get automatically set up for you when you create a new user on an Ubuntu 14.04 system. So now that it's done, we can simply create the container itself. So I'm just going to create a container called precise GUI using the download template, so I don't have to wait for the bootstrap. So I'm going to pull it from the internet. I pass it as Ubuntu precise 32-bit, which means I'm going to be able to install Skype and Steam 32-bit version without having to install hundreds of multi-arc packages. It's just simpler to just install 32-bit in that case. Hopefully, more and more software manufacturers will just start actually caring about 64-bit versions of their code, but it's not quite there yet. It takes tiny while to
Does this
grab
take a
the
little bit?
90
So
megs or so.
can I ask you another question?
Sure.
Is this a good time? Oh, wait, it's moving.
Yeah, it's unpacking now. And there, the container has been created. Okay, so what was the question?
No, I'm not going to ask my question. You're going to keep going. I'm going to ask when there's a
Okay,
pause.
sure. Going to be installing packages soon enough, so that's going to take a little while. Okay, so now I'm going to just edit the container configuration itself. We basically need a few more settings in there that are specific for a GUI container. Those are listed on my website, but the first thing I'm going to be adding is a map for my own user inside the container, so that my UID, which is in this case 201.105, is mapped directly to UID 201.105 inside the container. The main reason why I want that is so that the container can access the X server directly, and also access Pulse Audio for sound. That's basically needed because a bunch of stuff on the system authenticates using UIDs and GIDs, and since we are shifted because of the UID-GID map we've set up, that will just completely fail by default, unless you then tell the X server and Pulse to also allow those users. So it's just much simpler to say, okay, fine, my own user will not be running as a separate UID inside the container, will just be mapped straight through. So I'm just figuring out my UID, GID is there, and then setting up direct map for that UID and GID. Just typing it in. Obviously, most Ubuntu users are used to having UID and GID 1000. In the case where you have UID, GID 1000, which happens to be in the middle, well, not really the middle, the beginning of the existing UID and GID range that's already set up, it needs to be slightly different because you need to do first a map from UID 0 to 999. Then 1000 is mapped straight through. Then 1001 all the way to 65,535 are mapped again. The easiest in that case, just to copy paste what I've got listed on my blog, which are the right 6 lines you need for that case. So now that the UID map is done, there are a bunch more things that you need to basically copy paste from my blog post. Those allow the container to access devices directly. So we see that dev DRI, for example, for the graphic card, is mapped directly in. Dev SND for the sound card, same thing. The X socket itself is also bind mounted in. And so is dev video 0, so that you can access your webcam when you do Skype call or Hangout on Air or something like that. And the last one is setup script, which configures Pulse Audio.
Good. I was going to ask you what that one was. What? Sorry.
So the last one, you see home username. Obviously, you need to replace username by your actual username. And there you go. And those lines are the ones I just mentioned earlier, which are the ones you need if your UID is 1000 instead of something crazy like I've got on my machine. Where we see that you first set up a map from 0 to 999, which is not entirely obvious because it's basically the end of the range minus 1. So we see 0 to 1000. Then 1000 is mapped straight through. Then 1001 to 65,535 are mapped again. It's slightly confusing, but that's the kind of magic we need to get to get user namespaces working properly. Now I'm just going to write that setup Pulse script. There again, it's just in the blog post, so you just have to copy paste it. No change needed for this one. There. The script itself doesn't do anything fancy. It basically just tells your existing Pulse Audio to listen at a specific path inside the container so that the container itself can access it, and then give you sound and microphone access and whatever with the other word. And yeah, don't forget to make the script executable, otherwise it's going to be failing in a rather odd way. Lastly, you need to ch on the home directory within the container so that it matches your actual UID because when the container was created, the ID map for your own UID wasn't set up yet, so you just need to fix it again so that you don't get permissions problem in a tiny bit.
Stefan, you have me very curious. You said that if you don't set the permissions right, you're going to fail in a very weird way.
Yes. So
what's the weird way?
if you forget to put setup pulse.sh as executable, the container will fail to start. And when it does, it's not going to fail to start in the most obvious way. It's going to tell you to rerun the command without the flag, and then it's going to tell you a bunch of stuff that are a bit confusing, and eventually tell you something like, hey, the script is not executable. Then if you can remember which script it is, then you can just make it executable and everything works. Yeah, it's best just to make sure it is to begin with. So here I've started the container. As we see, it started successfully. So container is running, and I can now start a whole lot of copy pasting to actually install packages, all the packages we need to get Chrome to work in the container. And that's when we'll soon have a tiny bit of time, because the next one should take a little while. Yes. There we go.
Okay, let's see. So what are my questions? I'm trying to think of what, if I was watching this, what questions I might have. So I was asking you earlier about AppArmor, and you said, well, you know, AppArmor is great, secures your system, but you have to have an AppArmor profile, and not very many desktop applications have AppArmor profiles. And you mentioned that your browsers do, but it's not on by default. So why wouldn't I just turn on the AppArmor profile? Does it make sense to use both?
Yeah, it would make, well, so you can't use both, because inside the container you can't turn on AppArmor, because AppArmor doesn't support stacking just yet. It's been on the roadmap for a while. It should come in the next year, but it's not there yet. Outside of LXC, you could use AppArmor, and there is indeed a profile for Firefox. Just checking that it's actually disabled by default, but I think it is. Yeah, it is. And for a few more stuff, but most of them are disabled, and they are not allowed installed by default. The only desktop application I see there that's on by default is Events, which is the PDF reader in Ubuntu, Telepathy, so that's the IM instant messaging backend, and I think that's it for desktop stuff. Yeah.
So then why wouldn't I just enable those? What's even more awesome?
So those two are enabled. You could enable the Firefox one. The problem with that is, I believe, in some cases you won't be able to open files you download, possibly, because the Firefox profile won't allow Firefox to open whatever app you choose to open the file you just downloaded. Or it might also be blocking some plugins. I'm pretty sure they've made sure that Flash works properly, but it might be blocking some other plugins that you might add to your browser later on. Also, I guess they might not have felt like turning that on by default, because Firefox does tend to release new upstream versions every few weeks, and retesting everything to make sure there is no new thing getting blocked somehow might be a bit difficult. And we don't want our users to just have a broken browser in some countries where some plugins are common, but nobody else has that problem, kind of thing. So it might be worth turning that stuff on and just see whether it works with your case. And if you see that things start failing somehow, then it's probably worth turning the profile back off. Or just run everything in LXC. So I've got the basic dependency installed now, so I'm just going to download Chrome and the Google Talk plugin quickly. Well, as quick as my internet connection feels like anyway.
Your network connection isn't too bad.
Yeah, it's kind of bad today. It should be a slightly faster amount, but yeah, not too bad. Come on.
So now you're going to make it, so I feel like I haven't been shown something that makes it so that I click on an icon and and the container is going to start, but we're going to get there, right? Okay.
Yes.
I'm being I have to be patient,
I'm basically
Stefan.
installing all the bits in the container so that actually works, and then once that's done, just creating a launcher is reasonably simple.
Okay, I'll be patient then.
Right, so I'm installing the packages now. That's going to fail, so yeah, there, it just failed. That's normal.
Then why did I bother?
Because you need to basically install the packages so that they fail, they are half installed, and then we can run apt-get-f install to tell apt to resolve everything. And it's installing all the bits that were actually missing when the packages were first installed. So that way it's just grabbing a bunch more things, mostly GUI libraries and stuff that were missing. Right. Also, I'm doing that on an SSD, so if you don't have one in your machine, it might take 50 times more time or something. Because, yeah, it's a bit slow.
Okay, now that one failed.
Yes. And that one failed because my user is weird.
It's not because you don't have permissions right on a file?
It kind of is, but that's because my UID, as we saw earlier, is not 1000 as you're used to. It's some weird number, and I forgot to also change it inside the container, which I'm just doing now. And that
but for those of us that aren't setting our weird UIDs, we'll be okay.
You don't have to do that. Yeah, just copy paste what I've got on a blog post for the UID ranges, and you don't have to do that stuff. Because it's just needed if you are using some crazy UIDs instead. There, it succeeded now.
But I guess that's for a different discussion later, is why the heck you have such a strange ID, but we'll leave that.
Yeah, I'm basically using a corporate network with network authentication, so that's why. Okay, so now I'm actually writing the launcher script. That launcher script is what gets called when you click the icon. It basically starts the container. It checks whether the container is started. If the container is not started, it starts it. Then it spawns the command, which is Google Chrome, in there. And once the command exits, then it just kills the container unless something else started in the container in between. That's so that you can click on a bunch of other icons and you don't see everything disappearing randomly. So now that we've got the launcher, the last thing is to actually set up the desktop file, which is what's needed to get things integrated within Unity. So there again, it's just on my blog post. You just need to copy paste it, replace username by your actual username, and that's about all that's needed. Just save the file. And at this point, I should be able to just search in Unity. I see Google Chrome being present in the dash. And I can start it, and we see that Chrome is asking the usual first question and then starts as usual. And we see that the container is running. And we can also check that Chrome itself is running inside it. And indeed, there are like a ton of Chrome processes. So just lock it to the dash, and that's it for Chrome.
Cool.
Oh, and yeah, just checking, now that the app has been closed, we see that the container itself is now marked as stopped. If I click on it, Chrome starts again, and the container just started again. Pretty quick, as we can see. Okay, so that was first one, 2 to go.
So what's different?
The other ones are not step by step. The other ones are basically the same thing. You grab the package from the website, you install that package. it usually fails. Run apt get installed again to install whatever was missing when you first installed it. And then you copy the start Chrome script, which you have created, into, say, a start Skype script. And you change the command in there, and you're good. There are a few gotchas for Skype, which I've listed in the blog post. Specifically, you need to set Qt X11 no MIT shared memory to 1 in the environment, and set GNOME desktop session ID equals this is deprecated for it to be happy. The last one is a bit funny. I'm not really sure why they check for that specific variable in value, but they do. If you don't set it to this is deprecated, it's going to look ugly. So, some users have reported that you also need to set LD preload of libgl in some cases. It's apparently mostly for NVIDIA systems. I'm running on Intel, and I never had to do that. But if things fail somehow, you might want to consider adding that environment that variable to the environment. So first off, getting Skype from the website. Since I don't have the URLs handy as I did for Chrome, just going to go on the website, figure out where we're going to load it, there, and just select Ubuntu 12.04. So that's actually one good example where they only have a 12.04 version, which actually works fine with 14.04 if you install it, but if you want to be perfectly sure it works fine, and apparently they only tested it really for 12.04, you can, having a 12.04 container is pretty convenient. So, downloading. Wi-Fi isn't being nice. All right. So just installing it now.
No, so
and it failed as usual, so we're gonna get it installed. It installs the remaining bits, and then it will be good. Yes.
So why are you showing? So you've already shown me how to do it with Chrome. Why are you showing me this one too?
Just to show what to do with the other apps, and because it's actually wanted to show you how to replicate the setup I first showed, where I've got all three working properly. So Skype is mostly the same thing as Chrome. The only difference is those environment variables, which need to be defined. So when copying the launcher script, we just need to wrap the actual command around an environment variable. I think the most time is really creating the initial container, then adding extra stuff to it is reasonably simple. I occasionally install stuff like Wine or some other applications in there because I don't want to pollute the rest of my system, and that works reasonably well. So here I'm just showing, I'm editing the start Skype script, which is just a copy of start Chrome, and obviously replacing the Google Chrome command in there by env with the environment variables that are listed in the blog post. So env Qt X11 no MIT shared memory equals 1, and GNOME desktop session ID equals
This is deprecated.
Yes. There we go, and then actually typing the command name itself, just Skype, save that stuff, and we can actually test it by just running the script, and there we go, Skype is running.
And this one is going to run in the same, so if we start up Chrome, they're both going to be running in the same, they're sharing a container.
Yes. Yeah, they're sharing the same container. It would be trivial to run that in multiple containers.
Yeah, it looks like it would be too bad.
Right, the start Skype or start Chrome script actually contains a variable which gives it the container name. So if you have multiple containers, you can just change that to the right value. So here I'm just creating a desktop file to get the Unity integration going. So same thing, replace start Chrome by start Skype, replace the name by Skype. I'm not feeling like something fancy for the comment, so just put Skype and save that thing. The problem there is the icon, because I don't want it to look like Chrome, so I need to find where Skype installed its icon. So just going to do a quick search in the usual icon location to find the icon I need. There we go. Then just edit it in place and save the launcher script. And we're done. As we see, Unity is lagging a bit behind, so it still thinks that's a Chrome icon. That's fine. If you start it, we see that then it reloads and gets the right icon.
Okay, now call your mother, Stefan.
Yeah, I think my Skype account is pretty boring, actually.
She wants to talk to you.
There you go. You can see I've got absolutely zero contact.
Not even your mom? I don't know about this. You're going to be in trouble now.
I've got a regular phone and I need to call my mom.
Cool.
Okay, so that was Skype, and now we just need to get Steam working as well, and that will be it to get the same environment that I showed initially. So first off is figuring out where to download Steam, which I actually forgot. So let's see.
And I think just quickly glancing at your blog post, it seems like there really isn't anything special that you need to do.
Not really. I mean, following the blog post is mostly just doing copy-paste, and that should work for most systems. Unless you've got some really weird environment, it's going to work perfectly fine. As I've said, for the games, which are the trickiest one to run, I've tested with Intel hardware, because that's all I've got. Someone tested Skype with NVIDIA hardware, but I've no idea whether AMD ATI kind of hardware works at all, and whether there are some tricks that are needed there. That might be the case. If it is, I'm always happy to get comments on the blog post, then I can just edit it with that extra information.
That's cool.
So here, same thing. I grabbed the URL from Steam's website, and I'm trying to download it, which doesn't seem really to want to cooperate.
So this is definitely not cooperating.
Again. Yeah, trying again. That looks better. And just installing it. It failed because, yeah, that's what they usually do. And get the rest installed.
So, Stefan, do you run all of your icons on your desktop, or is everything in a container? What do you do on your system? What do you do?
Not really. I mean, currently, my system is basically what I'm showing. I've got Chrome, which I use mostly for corporate Hangout, like the one we're having currently. That's running from within an LXC container. So I've got two such containers, one running on my laptop, which I'm using to show how to set it up, and another one running on my desktop machine. So that's what I use the most, Google Chrome with the Google Talk plugin inside the container. I also have Skype, which is often running with various accounts, depending on who I need to talk to. And I mostly use Steam for, well, testing. I occasionally play a game here and there, but that's reasonably rare. But I also reuse the same
too often. Your user didn't seem very powerful in that game.
Yes, I also reuse the same container when I'm given some random piece of software in binary form I don't really trust. I just copy it over into the container and run it from there. So Steam is installed, launcher is done. Now I'm just going to quickly create the Unity integration, well, the desktop script. Same thing, I just need to figure out what is done.
But what's cool is, so if you were kind of experimenting and you're trying to figure out if you want to do this, you could have basically both. You could have the LXC version and the non-LXC version and just have a different little icon.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You could have both versions installed. You could just change your launcher script to point to some other icon that you have, or just make one or something.
Maybe you should have a little like head picture. Just picture of yourself, just the head, floating head. Maybe you don't
As you
want
can
that on
see,
your
my
desktop.
home internet is really not feeling like downloading Steam. So Steam is installed, as in their package is installed, but the package is mostly a wrapper to download the actual software in the user home directory, and that's taking a while.
Now that
So this,
time, Unity was caught up with you.
yes, it did. Unity refreshes every so often, and that's why it missed the icon update earlier with Skype, and that's why it missed Steam. If that happens, just run something or do any kind of Unity-ish action, like click something on the launcher, or just come back a few seconds later, and it should have seen it. So yeah, at this point, I've got all three installed again. So see Skype, Chrome, and Steam installed present in the launcher.
Cool.
I can just click on them, starting Chrome, starting Skype, and starting Steam, which will start downloading stuff because that's what it does. If I was going to wait half an hour or whatever for Steam to finish downloading, then eventually I could have it start and then start downloading games for a day and a half. And that's it.
Cool. All right, Stefan. Anything else you wanted to mention? Oh, no, there we are.
Yeah, trying to turn that thing off. So not really. I mean, that's obviously a nice tool which people can use. I mostly use it to run apps in older version of Ubuntu or different architecture. But the same could be done to run with a different distro. You could have an Oracle or Red Hat or whatever container and run some specific piece of software in there because they only support that distro. So it's definitely a pretty nice tool for that kind of stuff. Getting the integration done properly with the desktop is pretty tough. What I'm showing is basically minimal integration. You just have a launcher, you can click on it, it works, you can do some of the custom actions, that's fine. If you want to get stuff like MIME types so that you can, say, install a word processor in the container and then double-click an icon outside the container and have it start the app in the container, that's way more difficult. Same thing if you want to get proper integration so that apps can send content from one to another within the container. And to some extent, it's probably not something you actually want. If you really don't trust the app, you don't want it to be able to pull content from other apps outside of it.
True.
But it's something where there's a lot of room for improvement, and it could be. We've been discussing quite a bit on what we want our story for the new Unity 8 desktop session for the actual desktop machines to be like. And one thing that's been mentioned there and there is that it might be nice if so the Unity 8 desktop uses click packages, doesn't really use standard apt packages. And one thing that we are considering doing is having the Unity 8 shell let you install regular packages inside an LXC container that then show up inside the Unity 8 shell. So you can see in your Unity 8 launcher a bunch of icons. You click those, that starts a standard Ubuntu container, starts a standard X server, then starts the standard app on top of that, and it shows up on your machine. If we do end up doing that, we might be adding a lot more logic into Unity and some other bits and pieces so that this is actually done properly within Unity. And it knows that this app is actually running in a container, this app is not. And you could have things like you click on an icon and it tells you like, hey, what version do you want? Because you've got like 5 containers installed and it turns out that you've got that same app installed in 3 of them. So like, do you want the Ubuntu 12.04, 12.10, or what? And it just starts the right one.
Well, very
so
cool.
Definitely a lot of room for improvement there, a lot of things we've been considering. But I'm not a desktop developer, so hopefully you can find someone.
No, you're an LXC developer. Well, I'm on the server side of the house anyway, but I do use the desktop, so I think it's really cool. Anyway, thank you.
And that's the same thing. Like I'm not actually doing any desktop development. I do mostly LXC and backend stuff full time. But it turns out that the company and other things require me to run desktop applications every so often. So it's nice being able to just run them in a container as well.
Wait, so are you trying to tell me that Wait, sorry.
This one makes things like some things way simpler. Like I was in Europe last week. I didn't want. I just had my laptop. It's like, okay, well, I need to have Chrome and Skype and that stuff running, but I only had like 15 minutes before I had to rush to the airport. So what I did is simply made a tarball of the containers I had it on the desktop, on my desktop, pushed it over to my laptop, and packed it in place, and done. I had all of the software installed because I just shipped over the container and didn't have to install any package or anything.
Well, it was
So
funny
it's pretty nice for that.
yeah, that's
If you've
cool.
got everything actually running in containers, you can basically just get a blank Ubuntu system, just copy all of your containers over, and you're done.
Yeah.
So that's pretty convenient.
That is very nice. Well, I was kind of chuckling because earlier you said, well, I use the desktop because, well, you know, the company and other reasons. I'm like, well, of course you. I was going to try to see what you had to say about how could you not run a desktop. But anyway, nothing.
For quite a few months or years, actually, I've been just using command line only, and that's fine.
Yeah, I'm not. Why am I not surprised? Anyway.
Yeah. But there are,
super surprising.
with everything moving to the web now, it's kind of hard not having a full-fledged web
Well,
browser
I think
around,
I think I have gotten to that point where I'm like.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing. Actually, looking at what I'm running on my machine, I think that's the only thing I run besides terminals. So.
Anyway, okay, all right. Well, thank you so much, Stefan. I found this very, very interesting, and I'm looking forward to doing more of these with you. And if anyone is still watching now, thank you for joining. If you have feedback, questions, anything, don't hesitate to let us know. Take care. Thank you.